Hi, everybody. My name is Dawn Bueller, and I'm a teacher at Millbrook High School in Frederick County, Virginia. Today, I will be conducting professional development on a written apology. So, I'm doing this on behalf of the Shenandoah Valley Writing Project, and I will start by sharing my slides with you. And when I do so, you'll see it goes beyond a simple apology that we're talking about today. What I'm actually talking about is crisis communication in the media, recognizing and formulating effective apology. So, this is definitely a presentation on improving media literacy skills that goes beyond the written apology and recognizing and judging the worthiness of an apology that's been delivered through the media. And the source could be big business, it could be government, it could be any number of organizations that handle crisis, whether it's natural or man-made. So, currently, there's a media literacy crisis going on in the United States. And to some degree, you could say maybe less of a crisis in other places in the world, but definitely within the United States, a crisis that's recognized and has been researched. So, you can see the two quotes here. So, according to Education Week, we only have 14 states as of last January, that address media literacy education in law. So um, that is disappointing to say the least. But also, if you hone in on that last sentence, of these states, six passed this legislation within the past 3 years. So even greater disappointment there. Um, so with the onset of terms like fake news and recognizing that most adults and some children, or let me reverse that, many adults and our current youth do not currently have the media literacy skills to recognize a hoax or what is bogus or what is spin and so on. So I know a lot of English teachers teach rhetorical techniques in high school, but it goes beyond speaking strategies and understanding when things are just frankly being fabricated. So, with that, I will move on to start my lesson that I do with my students when I conduct my media literacy unit. So, crisis, uh, it can be broken up into, or crisis management can be broken up into four strategies. There's full disclosure, which is obviously preferred. You hold nothing back and you admit truthfully what you don't know as well. So, always the best policy. And then there's the apology, and the intent of that apology would be to express empathy, responsibility, and make an effort not to repeat the offense again. Now, um, and that is essential, and make reparations if necessary. There's speculation, which, if you can envision maybe that police officer standing at the podium and being battered with questions from um, uh, reporters that are eager for the truth. Sometimes people in public relations uh, feel obligated or mistakenly speculate. So, that police officer that often stands at the podium will say, I cannot speculate on that. Um, and that is to offer up a theory or conjecture, or just say, I think that might be the case, but it's obviously based on a lack of evidence. And then there's the no comment, which can take many, many forms. And I always tell my students no comment doesn't necessarily always specifically, literally sound and look like no comment. And we go through the various forms of those phrasings. So, next, oh, appears I am locked up. So, which crisis management strategy do you think works the best? Is a question I ask my students, and inevitably, someone will say full disclosure, and I'll ask them why. So, with full disclosure, you can see, tell them what you know, what you don't know, and how you plan to find out the answer to the questions, and hopefully when you'll get back to them if you can predict that. So today we're going over the apology. So a crisis communication response could involve a combination of these, and we're just going to focus on apology today. So at this point, it might be a good time to stop the video and have the students describe a situation in which they were led to apologize, or if they can't think of one, describe a situation where you should have apologized. So I do have the definition here and as support, and and then I have a couple of situations here for those that may need that extra support as well. For example, oh, it was obviously my fault. In this instance where you lie, you might apologize if you didn't keep a promise, and so on. And hopefully, we're not embarrassing people in public, but you never know. So, this is a good time to stop for 5 minutes for a quick write, and then you could ask students for responses and establish that background and connection before you continue with the slideshow. So next, I often talk to my students about word choice and tone and express how that matters when you're formulating an effective apology. Now, there are insincere apologies, and that's worth noting. And, I have a list here that I assign personalities to. There's a couple of songs out are dealing with non-apology or sorry, not sorry. So I listed them again as personas. So, for example, we often experience the blame switcher. It's your responsibility to let me know when I'm doing wrong, or the person that buys the gifts potentially, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're sorry, but there's a sense of guilt there that they're attempting to assuage, and there's an avoidance there. And then the jokester back at the top, I was just kidding, I didn't mean anything by it. So all of those are non-apologies. So the structure of a sincere apology will look like one of these options, and it could be in any order really, but the components are really what matter. And this is the beginning of setting up that structure so that the students can write their apologies. So I do provide support in terms of the vocabulary within these lists of parts to the apology. Like, for example, in option one, the word remorse. I don't know that my students know that term. So, or reparation and so on, self-castigation in number 7 here. So I do provide a worksheet. So in this document that I created for the students to support the vocabulary, you can see at the top there are terms that are in both option 1 and option 2, remorse, reparation, and so on. And with self-castigation, that's a tough one. And I usually talk about the spectrum with self-castigation. So obviously meaning criticism of oneself or reproof of oneself. So I talk about, again, the spectrum on one side, and if there's a degree, the least self-castigating is saying, "Oh, Dawn, why did you do that?" And I think we all have those moments. And on the extreme opposite end of self castigation, maybe historically, monks who lash themselves and maybe wear that hair shirt in terms of self punishment and so on. So as we scroll down here, you'll see those same options for the apology. And typically, what I have the students do is just like highlight which option they've decided to go with when they're assuming uh, a crisis, the positions of a crisis management team, or whatever persona that they assume when they're conducting the apology. And I'll come back to this document as I move through this presentation. So again, word choice is what we're talking about here. Um, I also talk about word choice in terms of uh, moving towards an apology with high responsibility and high sympathy. So studies show that the public in general, or people um, with personal apologies, whether it's public or personal, lean towards or perceive a more effective apology in one that has high responsibility. So if you assume responsibility and have a level of sympathy or empathy, that is the best apology. But lacking a clear expression of sympathy is not as bad as lacking a clear assumption of responsibility. So, in order to model those, I provide my students with examples of apologies all addressing the same situation with an oil spill. So, when we're talking about um, word choice and tone in apology, the most effective apology has been proven to be one that is high in responsibility in word choice and high in sympathy in terms of word choice and tone. So companies often feel like there might be some litigation associated with an apology, but really apologies are dealing with feelings. So um, while it seems like a company can be litigated for assuming responsibility, that is really something, the apology is really about reforming that trust between the public and that company or organization or the government. So when a company thinks about whether or not they should apologize, the severity of the violation obviously comes into play, and then the cost and benefit of offering apology, which is in most cases, apology is pretty low cost, and the effect of the apology can create substantial value for the company in terms of reforming that connection. So, with that said, we have the Marco oil spill um, off the coast of California, and these models of apology reflect the level of sincerity of the apology. So I let my students view these and compare the word choice. So active responsibility and high sympathy is modeled with the first apology, and then active responsibility and low sympathy is modeled in the second. Low responsibility, high sympathy. So a reversal here in the third, and it's always interesting to compare the two. And then the last is obviously not the best apology at all. It's the worst. It's low responsibility and low sympathy. So not effective at all. And so I do let my students view these or read these and pick through the word choice. So with those models, students can see word choice matters. Next, I'm going to move forward to the term reparations, which I'll go back. In option two, we have a, um, a formatted apology that probably would be communicated by big business because there's offered compensation for the injured party. So when you think about an oil spill, repaying a fishing industry that is severely crippled as a result, there may be an offer of some form of repayment. So again, that reparation is a consequence and um, a gesture of responsibility, some assumption. So assurances also are very important. So this may be more in the line of a personal responsibility with option one, but always you want the assurance that you will not repeat the same offense. As a human being, um, the higher quality apology is one that ensures that or communicates that the incident will not happen again. So going back to reparations, um, there is a history to that. And, and this is just interesting. Aristotle came up with this idea to end blood feuds and this notion that we need to distinguish between revenge and corrective justice. So, with hopefully some sort of payment to the injured party, that desire to revenge would de escalate feuds or even end the feud. So, I just thought that was an interesting expansion on reparation. It's not absolutely necessary to share with the kids unless you deem it necessary. Um, so the core of this activity that accompanies this professional development and lesson will take probably 30 minutes, maybe more. But what I have my students do is look at real world situations that required either governmental or organizational or even big business apology. So um, I provide the scenarios and the background knowledge that the students need to move forward and write an apology that takes the format that I presented earlier, one of the two options. I do adapt these scenarios to elementary and ESL as well, and I'll get to that in a minute. But the reading materials or the background that the students need are on each slide. And then I ask my students to assume a role and complete an apology. So as we move forward here, I have examples of those scenarios. And you can adapt this activity however you see fit. But I went with the Exxon Valdez oil spill, which is truly a crisis, man made, and had a terrible impact on the environment. So the roles that students assume would be the Exxon CEO or a public relations representative for the company. And one of the two would be responsible for issuing that apology. And as you click the links, you'll see the students have the knowledge required to formulate that apology, but also they get a good grasp of the situation through visuals. And hopefully that impacts their word choice as well. So there's the Exxon Valdez, and I provide quite a bit of reading to accompany that, from news articles to videos and so on. All right, so I'll close that out. We'll move on to the next example. And here's a student sample of option two. You see at the bottom corner here. This is a overachiever, a very thorough apology that incorporates all the components of the option two apology. All right, so next we have Hurricane Katrina. and the impact that it had due to lack of preparation and response time, um, and planning from both FEMA, the President of the United States, or even the mayor of New Orleans, Mayor Nagin. So the background again is provided here in links. There's a video from National Geographic that addresses the impact of Hurricane Katrina. And then we have even FEMA.gov information. You'll have to scroll down past a few other hurricanes to get to that information. But towards the bottom here, we have Hurricane Katrina and the impact it had on future policy regarding emergency response. So, whatever role the students decide to assume, that would be the voice that they're speaking with. And we'll move on to the next one. All right, so here's a student sample utilizing option one in terms of their response, and they have Mayor Nagin as the persona that they assumed. And then the third option, and these are all kind of high school, middle school uh, scenarios that I targeted, but White is Purity ad by Nivea, which is a skincare product. So this was a online campaign through social media. Nivea, which is a German company, marketed this in the Middle East. So you could see the offensive nature of having a woman that appears to be um, white, and White as Purity is listed on the ad. So the apology response here is um, is is very much in response to public anger and the need to relieve that anger and hopefully regain some trust from the customers or the consumers after such a terrible misjudgment. So I have option one and option two student examples here to view as well. And I wouldn't recommend that you show these to your students unless you're choosing to do other crisis situations. And there are plenty of real world scenarios out there that you could use, and then use my examples here as models for your students before beginning. So if you're an elementary ESL teacher, um, a lesson on apology would not be out of place. And what I offer here is a bilingual book. Punk the Skunk Learns to Say Sorry. So the issue here is, personal responsibility to be kind to each other. And if you click on the YouTube link, that will take you to an English recording of the story. And my recommendation is to stop the story at 4 minutes and 19 seconds and then have the students complete a list of things that one of the characters should apologize for and recognize how it made his friends feel. And then obviously that would encourage some sense of empathy, and then choose an action that requires apology. So then the students would complete a 4 square apology, which I will share in a minute. So another book that addresses apology is Rocket Says Clean Up. And my recommendation is to do the same thing. There's a video with a reading of Rocket Says Clean Up. A 4 square apology uh, is a nice format for the same. And then that may lead to writing an apology letter from the beach authority to be read to the media, as is mentioned in the book. So, towards this book, which is interesting, actually involves the media coming to the beach to recognize um, the efforts of the local populace to clean up the beach. All right. So, in the intent of the apology letter from the beach authority would be to make sure they take responsibility and the local populace takes responsibility for keeping the beach clean. All right, so last book is The Lunch Thief. And again, there's a read aloud. The issue here is hunger, homelessness, and poverty. And so here I think a dialogue between two characters that reflects um, the elements of apology would be beneficial. And again, that four-step apology I keep mentioning um, is is listed in this lesson plan. And I didn't come up with this lesson plan, but it looks to be the level of, first, second, third, fourth grade. And the format of the four-step apology looks similar to what we do at a higher level. So you would look at the person, use a friendly voice, say, I'm sorry for it, next time I will. So indicating that you do not intend to repeat the same mistake, but to even correct your actions and do better the next time. So I will back out of that. And so, in terms of influence, the benefit of modeling is expressed by Kelly Gallagher in The Best Interest of Students. So, and I thought that was particularly relevant today in terms of discovering the appropriate voice, which is what we're doing with our apologies and word choice and tone. So, um, given this task, students will have the world skills to both establish better personal connections with people and move forward with their strained relationship if there's an offense, but also they'll recognize sincerity and authenticity in the media in terms of understanding when big business is serious about their apology or if it's a half-hearted effort meant to stave off anger. So, um, as we move on, um, the interesting thing about conducting this lesson the first year that I did it, which was last year, at the beginning of the year, that same year, about a few weeks after that lesson, Loudoun County Schools, public schools, apologized to the Black community about the historical inequities in education. So my students were then, uh, at that point, were able to judge the effectiveness of said apology. Based on our previous lesson, I asked the students to apply that skill and evaluate literature as Gallagher mentions here in a very important point in Loudoun County Public Schools history. So, based on this, my students judged that the apology, if you look to the right here, they rated their responsibility in this apology as very effective, and the level of sympathy was not as high as the level of responsibility. But again, that just drives the point home that responsibility is more important than sympathy, but it was fairly high in sympathy as well. So my students did communicate um, um, in terms of responding to what is achieved as a result of this late apology. I then had them answer what they felt um, was achieved. Repeating myself, I apologize. But their responses included it shows their awareness and remorse for their past grievances. So they're incorporating that language that they learned a few weeks ago or a few weeks prior. Uh, People who are not of the Black community who go to Loudoun County schools can feel safer now that they know that the schools that they go to support them and deeply regrets the decisions they made earlier. They also acknowledge their current faults as well as promising to fix them. So, again, recognizing the parts of apology and applying that real life skill. And I was particularly proud of them for being able to carry that lesson forward to a real life scenario. So, in terms of resources, I include a hyperdoc with the slideshow. And if you click on the hyperdoc, I consolidated my research into a table and I share that with you. At some point, maybe some of this will become dated, but I tried to avoid that situation. So, what I include in here are links on crisis examples um, in business and let's see. And then modern apologies around the world. So, apology in Africa, Japanese apology. And the Japanese really have a much stronger apology culture than even Americans. And Americans are very much on the rise in terms of the number of apologies that are issued. If you think about it through pop culture, people are constantly apologizing for social media posts. Sports figures are apologizing for public image faux pas or comments or actions. So this is very much, as I've said before, with the angle of improving their public image, but also reestablishing that trust with their followers or their fans and so on. So there's a little bit of apology around the world. And then there's non apology or apology refusal. I found a poem that addresses apology that I thought was particularly effective. Songs, and this particular song is a humble apology song, and this guy is actually hysterical, and not all of his stuff is really appropriate for the younger ones because he is conducting parody. So one of his songs is "I'm sorry I ate the last slice of pizza," but he's really not sorry about eating the last slice of pizza. So you can explore his songs if you want to on your own, but this one is good for the classroom. There's crisis and apology in music. Um, again, um, there's crisis songs. Billy Joel, "We Didn't Start the Fire." Protest songs about social justice that might require apology in certain situations, and all just to give relevance and background, and hopefully maybe fire the synapses in the brain with music. So there are a number of songs here dealing with social justice as well. So dealing with situations that may have required apology at one point. And then I have historical and modern apology in the US. So if you're a history teacher, this is definitely a cross curricular connection here. If you want to assume the persona of, I'll let this catch up, um, of the federal government in terms of apologizing to the Native people. There is a joint resolution that you can read, and um, and again, if you're a history teacher, this is the government acknowledgement and apology. You could assume the persona of a specific governmental figure, like Andrew Jackson for the Trail of Tears. You could assume the persona and write an apology. All right, and then other apologies in the U.S., more current ones, Penn Museum, and the unethical possession of human remains is a more current situation that requires apology. And then sports, politics, and so on. So, all examples of modern apology. And then elementary resources listed at the end here. So, books that model authentic apology and genuine forgiveness, video books, and then the Foursquare apology. articles, should you ask your child to apologize, and so on, lesson plans, and a social story dealing with someone that struggles to say sorry. All right, so with that said, I will close that out and return to my worksheet here that I talked about. It has the levels of apology and then the rubric for rating that apology. And I made this myself, so there may be small issues with it, but at this point, I used it with my students and there were no complaints. So maybe if I find a hiccup later, I will make some changes to that. So those are the extra resources. And if you decide to continue with the lesson and talk about the other crisis communication strategies, um, there's an example of no comment. So I created a no comment statement example sheet here, and this is in the resources hyperlink doc I made as well, so you can find that there. But anyway, examples of no comment so that my students can see that no comment doesn't always directly look like no comment or sound like that. Um, and I'm sure we've all heard these. I don't have that information to on hand to answer that question right now, but I will get back to you later. And that is definitely a typo. And then another example, I'm not the right person to answer that question, but I will get someone who can answer that question to contact you shortly. So we all know that shortly might actually be a lot later, if at all. So just a matter of kind of pushing someone off to the side without actually directly answering the question. I appreciate there's some interest in that, and it is something we want to get to the bottom of. What I can say now is, and again, sidestepping the question, I'm not going to add anything that has been asked and answered. Whether it has or has not, you'd have to be paying attention. We don't know. I don't have any information. I don't have any answers. I'm not making any news today. I made that clear. So again, the tone fluctuates with your no comments. And so I just really allow my students to look at that and whether or not there's an activity in there. If you find one, definitely please share with me at another date. So, just a final thought as I'm closing out this professional development about media literacy. I just want to emphasize the point that while this is about understanding media influence and often we focus on digital safety and truth decay and fact checking with our literacy units. Um, Media literacy skills go beyond that. And um, if we can get the students to apply the skills that we have today in other areas as well and be able to evaluate the process as we did with the Loudoun County apology, then we have done so much more for the students than just giving them the skills of fact checking and determining truth decay. So I did want to say that, just to emphasize that students should be good digital citizens as well, and that's a term that's being thrown around quite a bit recently too. So I tell my students at the end of the lesson that they also have a social obligation as well to allow crisis teams time to respond. If, let's say, for example, and this has happened, you're in a train wreck, the train has derailed, and you know, it's wonderful that you're not hurt and you're able to get off the train. But the moment you pull out your phone and start recording um, what you know very little about, despite the fact that you were involved with the train wreck, for you to record your speculation and post it on social media is basically opening up public response to your video, and it could possibly go viral. And by doing that, it's unfair to those crisis management teams. If you think about it, they probably don't know what's going on. They don't have boots on the ground, and in all honesty, you probably know a little bit more than they do, but when you post it to social media, it's unfair to that crisis response team. You fan the fire of speculation, and frankly, that could lead to hysteria as well. Think about other people that may be on that train that have loved ones and don't know what's going on. So you've just basically are just entertaining the masses. It's not about information and getting facts out there. It's about entertainment value. So I just emphasize that to my students, that they have a social obligation and responsibility just as much as that crisis management team. So practice good digital citizenship and be contributors and not inhibitors. So, with that, I would like to close out the presentation and thank everyone for allowing me to have this platform to hopefully affect some change through writing with our students. Bye.